Okay, so this is a map from nationalatlas.gov, which apparently this website has expired, but this is still a good map because it shows the federal areas inside the state of Texas. This is actually a territory, the territory of Texas, and these are actually territories of the United States, all these colored areas here. We have Bureau of Reclamation, Department of Defense, Fish and Wildlife, Forest Service, National Park Service. So when you're on these properties belonging to the United States, which is the federal government, it would fly a federal flag. And so they have some places that they purchase and they can fly their flag. Okay, so because those federal territories are a situation, and it's called a situation because it's under a different form of government, which is the federal government. It's also referred to on like state of Texas and probably other states as well, tax authorities such as the County Appraisal District. It's called in there a CITIS, for at least some places that I know of. It's called a CITIS. A CITIS is also considered a state as well as many other things. A case, a footing, a place, a seat, okay, an agreement, an arrangement, okay, a house, a boat, a seat. Okay, so what is a CITIS? Is the place to which, for purposes of legal jurisdiction or taxation, a property belongs. So this is like what state a property is in, what state a federal building is in, okay, for purposes of a legal jurisdiction. Now, I've gone over the word legal in one of my other videos where I explained to you that a legal thing is a fiction. Fictional things are man-made things, not lawful things made directly by the laws of nature. So in this video, I want to talk about the flags, but in order to understand the flags, you have to know jurisdiction, which is the situation or the state or the place where a thing is and who has authority over it. So the definition of jurisdiction is power and authority. The power and authority is the situation that that land is under, and that's the CITIS. If you look on a county appraisal district, you might have to dig around, but sometimes you can find CITIS, and then it'll have the various addresses of that property, which would be using the federal designation for state, like for Texas, it's TX, or the zip code. Okay, and I'm talking about flags today, but you have to understand the state. So under Title IV, Chapter 1, Section 1, we see flag and seal, comma, seat of government, comma, and the states. The flag, stripes, and stars on the flag of the United States. Okay, not United States of America. And I've explained that there are two places. There's the United States and there's the United States of America. It's in the preamble of the Constitution that we, the people of the United States, which is the federal people, are going to do some work that results in some benefits listed in the preamble for the United States of America. So the flag is for the federal government. It's not for the United States. So it's for the lands purchased where they have exclusive legislative jurisdiction. So we, the people of the United States, do some work, and all the work is listed in the Constitution for the outcome, which is a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. So this is the result of them, the United States federal government, working for the United States of America, which are the states. So here we have Donald Trump giving an acceptance speech in front of flags that are just plain flags. They almost look like they were taken up out of a bin, maybe wadded up and then just hung on poles because they look pretty crinkly. Here's Biden, and this flag has a red and gold tassel and gold fringe, and this is the federal flag. This is the president's flag with a seal on it, and it's not listed in Title IV as being an actual flag. It's just a piece of cloth with a seal on it. So here's Trump, and he's speaking in front of the red and gold tassel. And the seal, this flag over here, has also the tassel. Now, this is an unofficial flag as far as I could tell because there's no law making this a flag. This is the only flag over here, the red, white, and blue, the stars and stripes, and it's the flag for the federal government. So he's speaking in front of this flag here. Okay, the flag is for the United States of America. The flag is for the United States, not the United States of America. Here we have the governor of Texas. He's also speaking in front of a flag with gold fringe, and it has fringe on the bottom. This is a gold tassel. And then the Texas flag also has fringe and a tassel. So there's some controversy as to what this all means. I've read that this gold fringe and tassel simply means that it's a flag to be flown inside and it's just an embellishment. But I've also read that this flag, when it has this type of tassel and it has an eagle on top and it has fringe on the bottom, means that the president's speaking as commander-in-chief. You can Google this in quotes. The president's colors and design are similar to the president's flag afloat, but are made of silk with heavy silk embroidery and embroidered with gold and silver fringe, with red, white, and blue cord and tassel, and a gold eagle on the pike. The colors are displayed when the president is in the presence of troops as commander-in-chief. Okay, so does that mean that he cannot display the flag at other times? No, I don't think so. But when the flag's displayed in this way, he may be speaking as commander-in-chief to the troops. So who he's speaking to matters because we have a variety of things called jurisdictions. And if you've watched my other videos, you'll see that you'll see what the varieties of jurisdiction are, which is the situs, which is the state. Okay, there are two kinds of goods. Some are movable, some are immovable. The former take their law from the person, i.e. the domicile of the person, the latter the situs of each place, so that no regard being had to the place of origin, death, or domicile alike of the heirs as of the descendant himself, they shall be distributed according to the laws of the places where the goods either are or are understood to be. So an immovable, that would be like a courthouse, right? So we're going to look at this, and this is a case law. In the United States Court of Appeals for the 7th Circuit, number 16139, United States of America ex rel. Rushing Greer, petitioner, versus Frank J. Pate, warden, Illinois State Penitentiary. And this is an appeal from the United States District Court for the Northern District of Illinois, Eastern Division, Honorable James B. Parsons, judge presiding. Here's the index. And this is on Google Books, so you can go on and see this book if you look up what I just showed you. The United States government was granted and is presumed to have accepted exclusive jurisdiction over the premises of the United States Post Office. Illinois ceded exclusive jurisdiction on the post office land, and only the federal courts have jurisdiction over offenses committed on that land. So federal crimes occur on federal lands only. Federal crimes cannot occur off federal lands. Now, if you commit a federal crime on federal land and run off federal lands, then they can summons you back to court to answer for your crime. Now, there's a variety of subject matter jurisdictions to which they claim have authority off federal lands, but they don't because statutes apply on the federal lands. So their laws apply on their lands. Okay? Now, they don't have the right to make law, to be the only lawmaker on all the federal lands, only the ones where they have exclusive legislative jurisdiction. And those were supposed to be, according to the Constitution, for defense purposes only. And that's defense with a C, not an S. Petitioner is entitled to the benefit of the presumption of acceptance of exclusive federal jurisdiction over lands acquired prior to 1940, and to the benefit of any doubt as to whether the portion of the post office where the alleged crime took place was acquired before or after 1940. Now, as far as I know, the post offices fly the federal lands, not the state lands. Not the state flag. Even without the service of formal notice of acceptance by the departmental head, exclusive jurisdiction was accepted by the federal government in the manner prescribed by the state of Illinois in its session statute. So it depends on what the session statute says, whether or not the post office lands have a jurisdiction limited only to the federal government, or if the state retained some jurisdiction, because the post offices nowadays are not used specifically just for defense purposes. They're used for private purposes also. By its conduct, the United States government accepted exclusive criminal jurisdiction over the premise of the main Chicago post office. So by its conduct. So just by the way it acts. So let's look at some of the stuff they say in this case. This is a habeas corpus proceeding in 1961. Petitioner Rushing Greer was indicted and tried for murder in the criminal court of Cook County, Illinois. He was sentenced to the state penitentiary for a term of 199 years. On appeal to the Illinois Supreme Court, his conviction was affirmed. The alleged crime took place on the premise of the United States Post Office Building, Van Buren and Canal Streets, Chicago, Illinois. The record of the state trial indicates that a loading dock on the street side of the building was the scene of the occurrence. The United States government acquired title to the real estate on which the post office building stands by a series of conveyances extending over 24 years. The first parcel was acquired in 1927 and the final one in 1951, according to the records of General Services Administration. So remember, the Constitution says that the federal government can have exclusive legislative jurisdiction over an area within the state to which they erect a new state. So all those federal areas together are considered a new state to which they hang their flag and have jurisdiction without state interference. But when those lands are used for defense purposes, and they're allowed to have post offices and post roads on those lands, they weren't supposed to just go around the state buying lands for any arbitrary purpose. That came later. In the hearing on the habeas corpus petition, court-appointed counsel for Greer exhibited to the court a photostatic copy of a deed dated September 17, 1951, conveying a parcel of land from Gulf Mobile and Ohio Railroad Company to the United States. I'd also like to point out here that on OLRC, you can see that Rockefeller also donated lands to the United States, to which he ceded all his jurisdiction to them. Without contradiction by the respondents or the United States Attorney's Office, counsel assumed that this 1951 conveyance involved the land upon which the post office building was built and where Greer allegedly committed the crime. It was also assumed that the 1951 conveyance was the only land acquisition for the post office. Accepting this assumption, Judge Parsons made a finding that the post office property was acquired in 1951, and coupled with this with an additional finding that the United States had not, by any affirmative act is important, it has to be affirmative, not, what did they call it earlier? By conduct, not by conduct, but affirmative. Had not, by any affirmative act, accepted exclusive jurisdiction of the property so acquired, meaning the state still had some jurisdiction over the property. So post offices generally have only the federal flag flying, but there may be some cases where they have both flags. I've not seen one, but I've not been to all the post offices either. Usually they have the federal flag flying, which means that it's under federal control, that land is under federal control. When they have both, they're saying that they have some sort of concurrent jurisdiction, meaning both the state and the federal government has authority. Okay, so what is a state? It's probably not what you think it is. We're skipping down to page 4. A statute of the state of Illinois enacted in 1923 and enforced in 1951 conferred consent upon the federal government pursuant to Clause 17, Section 8, Article 1 of the United States Constitution. Okay, what that clause says is that the federal government, with the permission of the state, wants to purchase some lands inside the state, which would be these purple areas because these are Department of Defense. and they want to erect forts for defense with the sea purposes, and that the state has to agree to cede all lawmaking power to the federal government for those areas. So when they bought these lands, these territories inside the state, that's where they erected their new state. And all these lands, all these federal lands combined are called the state of Texas, not Texas or the territory of Texas. These are the territories inside Texas that were ceded to the federal government, where the federal government hangs its flag. And so when you see the president speaking in front of the flag, whether it have gold fringe or whether it have no gold fringe, he is speaking to the military and the legislatures of the state. He's not speaking to you. He cannot speak to you if you're an American citizen. If you claim to be a citizen of the United States, you're claiming to be on the federal lands and maybe using services off the federal lands. Okay, so let's continue. That's what Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 says. Of the United States Constitution, to acquire land for the post office and ceded to the United States exclusive jurisdiction and over any land so acquired for all purposes. That's not true. It's not for all purposes, because the Constitution says it's for forts, arsenals, and such buildings, and those buildings come under the definition of defense with a C, not defense with an S, the way they portray it now. It's two different words. And in English, defense with an S, just the word defense doesn't even exist in the old dictionaries. It's always been defense with a C. They change it to an S in some cases when they add a suffix. Or in Latin, defense with an S means vengeance. Defense with a C gets its origins from the Old French Norse language, which means to fortify, which is in the Law of Nations. Okay, so for all purposes, okay, so their jurisdiction, they have the right to make the rules without state interference, not for all purposes for defense, only for defense. In this appeal to the Illinois Supreme Court, Greer asserted that the federal government lacked jurisdiction because the alleged crime took place on federal property. A loading dock of the post office building. This issue was not settled on the merits by the Supreme Court because the record did not then show the manner in which the federal government acquired title to the property and jurisdiction. The Supreme Court therefore held that the record, as then presented, was entirely insufficient to support defendants' claim that the United States government had exclusive jurisdiction over crimes committed on post office property. Now remember, the defendant is the United States. The defendant is the federal government. The federal government brought this case forward. The federal government brought this forward. And they're saying they have the right to try this in the court as a crime because it occurred on federal land, whereas this guy, Frank J. Pate, who is in prison or was in prison at this time for committing a crime. I'm not saying he didn't deserve to be in prison. If you commit a violent crime, especially murder, you need to just go to prison forever, or whatever those people decide. But the question is whether the federal government had the right to put him in a federal prison or if this is a state issue. Okay, and so what they're arguing is whether this is a state issue or a federal issue, because apparently the federal government did not have the title over this property for exclusive jurisdiction, meaning it had the right to hear all cases whatsoever over anything that happens on this land. Because remember, Article 1, Section 8 says in all cases. arising on the lands, meaning the seat and the lands purchased. But those are supposed to be for defense purposes. So the post offices, when used for defense purposes, would have to be on military reservations. On habeas corpus, the United States District Court, the court below mentioned the federal government's final acquisition of the property in 1951, that the inventory report of the General Services Administration, that's GSA, you can go look through some of their old manuals, and they have this stuff on there because they keep track of all the federal lands, showed that the government's interest in this post office property was proprietorial only. So let's look at what proprietorial is. Give me a second to find my paper. There's only a million of them on my desktop here. And because I have a million papers, it takes forever to open anything up. Okay, so we're going to go down to this paper here. Proprietorial interest only. Now this is under Code 4. So if you see something that says Code 4 for jurisdiction, it's proprietorial. This term is applied to those instances wherein the federal government has acquired some right or title to an area in a state, but has not obtained any measure of the state's authority over the area, meaning it belongs to the state. In applying this definition, recognition should be given to the fact that the United States, by virtue of its functions and authority under various provisions of the Constitution, has many powers and immunities not possessed by ordinary landholders with respect to areas in which it acquires an interest, and of the further fact that all its properties and functions are held or performed in a governmental rather than a proprietorial capacity. So it depends on what the proprietorial laws are in the state, what the government can do on that land. It's supposed to be for maybe providing a service. And those services are actually supposed to be for the people on the federal lands because they didn't have a lot of things available to them back in the old days, like hospitals and schools, which is basically how the government has pulled the wool over our eyes and taken over everything, as they created these states within the state through contracts outside the Constitution, or at least that's what it looks like. So proprietorial interest is defined by the General Services Administration, that's GSA, as where the federal government has acquired some right or title to the state property, but not obtained any measure of the state's authority over the area. So they have right to title, but no authority. Although the state of Illinois had consented to and had ceded exclusive jurisdiction to the federal government, the Postmaster General or other authorized officer had failed to file a notice of acceptance with the governor of the state as to parcels acquired after 1940. So they have to file a notice of acceptance with the governor of the state as to parcels acquired after 1940, as provided in TIT 40, which is Title 40, United States Code, Section 255, Appendix 10, text of statute, infrastructure. Consequently, the district court concluded criminal jurisdiction remains with the state, and the court dismissed the petition. And then the federal government comes back and appeals because they want that. They want that power. They want that authority to remain in control of crimes committed on lands that they only have title to. And they continue arguing in this because this is the appeal. Okay, so when they have control over a place, that place should be flying the federal flag. When they don't have control over that place, they should not be flying a federal flag. But when they have control along with the state, they would be flying both flags. Statutes are confined to their own territory and have no extraterritorial effect. So because the statute, the federal statute didn't apply off the federal lands, they're arguing that the federal government had no jurisdiction over this case or this property. So this flag that we see, they speak in front of it when they're speaking to the United States, its own seat and its military persons, or the legislators of the state. And they must be displayed when they're speaking in front of the troops as commander-in-chief. And it gives a description, a complete description of the flag. And you notice when Trump accepted his presidency, there's no embellishments on these flags. I think there were eagles on top of here. So he's probably got a flag for every state, even though those aren't state flags, they're all federal flags. So the situs is where you sit. This is non-situs. The off the federal lands are non-federal situs. On federal lands are federal situs. Now the federal government has states inside the state, and for the state of Texas, it's a little confusing as to how they wrote this, but lawyers and politicians are really good at confusing people. So the territory properly included within and rightfully belonging to the Republic of Texas may be erected into a new state. So it's not all the territory. It's not the entire state. It's only the territory that they ceded. Only the territory they gave up, these little pieces of land, to erect a new state. Okay, it's called State of Texas, with a Republican form of government. So here you have Texas, the Republic of Texas, giving up lands to the federal government to which they fly their flag. And when they talk in front of the flag, or really when they talk at all, they're talking to the people on these areas. This was erected a new state. All these areas erected a new state called State of Texas. I disagree with this lowercase s. I've got to try to find an original annexation that is actually readable, because I have a copy of the original, but it's the ink is so worn off you can't see most of it. And I believe in that one it does have a capital S, but I'll have to go back and make sure. With a Republican form of government, because it comes under the Constitution. And the state of Texas Constitution that was over these areas, the federal areas inside the state, have to do with how that state and the federal government are going to interact and provide services for the people inside Texas that are federal people. So it's basically how the federal people and the non-federal people are going to get along. But it applies to the federal people. The state of Texas Constitution that is for the federal government inside Texas on the federal lands is called the State of Texas Constitution, with a Republican form of government. Republican form is different from a republic. A republic is a commonwealth. A Republican form is just a certain way of electing people. Okay, and then it goes on. And if you wanted to know more about how things are written legally by attorneys, this was a good video. It's gotten some good reviews. It's got 1.9 thousand up and 62 down. It's gotten some good comments. But this is on symbolic logic. Okay, and you can get an idea of how attorneys write and how they make sense of things because they use logic. So if you wanted to go... If you wanted to go and check out this video, it's here on YouTube. Part 1, Symbolic Logic, the Basics, Letters, Operators, Connectives by Teach Philosophy. People who have a bachelor's degree in philosophy will always, as long as their grades are good, will always get accepted into law school. And as a matter of fact, law schools prefer people with philosophy degrees. A bachelor in philosophies. Okay, so they don't write the same way we write. Common people write. They use it's like a math code. It's symbolic. It's logic. It comes under the maths and sciences. So that's probably why a lot of people don't understand what's been written by these attorneys and how you think you understand something because you're interpreting it as just a common person using common language, whereas they interpret things differently because they assign symbols to the letters, to the words, and then they come up with maybe a completely different meaning than you do when you just read it using common language and common ideas. So you have over here, down here, it says appearing in the jurisdictional code column indicates the legislative jurisdiction. Now this, in case I didn't tell you, this came from the GSA book. Now remember in that case I just read to you, it mentions General Services Administration. That's what this is, the General Services Administration. This is the one from 1962. There's a lot of them out there. They're on HathiTrust and probably some other websites, Google. But in this book, it has this, and it has a form that they use to designate where the federal lands are and what their jurisdiction is. Code A1 exclusive, and then it says date of land acquisition, concurrent, partial. Okay, so it may have changed. So it may have been unknown, and then they had just a proprietorial interest, and then they agreed with the state to have a partial interest, and then maybe they finally had exclusive. I don't really know how they do it. I'm just guessing. And they should have these somewhere on file. This is Budget Bureau number 29.6202. And this one expires December 31, 1963. But they should have all of this on file somewhere, and it should list the jurisdictions for every property that they have under federal control. And then the federally created state. Let's look at that really quick. There is a congressional record. So the federal areas inside the state are the federally created state, which it says that's what it's going to do, such as in this Texas annexation agreement, that it's going to erect a new state. Not in all of Texas, but only those lands that were ceded may be erected into a new state. Just those territories that they ceded. And you saw the case law where it talked about Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, that they have to purchase through the consent of the state. That's called a situation or a situ. It's called a status, a state. And their statutes apply to their territory only. So if their statutes apply to their territory, federal or federal state, they don't apply to us because we're not on their lands. So let's look for this. I've shown you this in other videos. If you've already seen it, you don't have to continue watching. But for those of you new here, I will show you the congressional record. This is from another video. The Congressional Globe, the official proceedings of Congress published. This is the wrong one. This is the one on white male American citizens of the United States and how they couldn't say that because it didn't actually exist. You have a citizen of the United States, and those are the ones on federal lands, and you have an American citizen, and those are the ones off federal lands. So there's another congressional record from, I think it's from 1867. I know I have it here. Here we go. And I'm sorry that you can't really see it because once I expand it so much, it's difficult to see. But this is from 1867, the Congressional Globe, page 1565. You can go on the LOC website, that's Library of Congress, and search this, and you'll find it if you're diligent. And it's Mr. Cowan, and he's asking the president. He's saying, why, Mr. President, what is a legal state government? Is it a government cooked up for a state here in Congress, or is it a government that the people of the state make for themselves? The people of the territory, all the territory of Texas are settlers. They settled the land because this is just wild country. Just wild country, overgrown, no cities, no towns, no roads, and they settle it. They domesticate it. It's the domestic. The lands are domesticated. The settlers and inhabitants domesticate the land. It's our land. The federal government come in and put some of these places here and created a legal state, which legal means fiction or artificial, a corporation, an association, which is not necessarily a bad thing because these are supposed to be for defense with the C purposes, to protect all of the rest of the land. The people off the federal land are American citizens. The people on the federal land with an oath are members of the government, and they're called citizens of the United States. Okay, they fly their flag. And and then we're supposed to have just the state flag, which by now they've probably just taken it on as being theirs, belonging to them. But that's my video on flags. And so now you can like, share, and subscribe. And if you don't want to do two of those things, you can share and leave a comment. I like to talk to people about things and see what people think, and see what their thoughts are. And so comment on the videos, and go ahead and like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.